In 1995, a tiny startup called VioWeb did something crazy. While their massive competitors built software using C++ and Perl, VioWeb's founders wrote their entire application in Lisp, a programming language from the 1950s that most programmers considered dead. The result, they could build new features in hours while their competitors took weeks. In 1998, Yahoo bought them for $49 million. The co-founder behind this strategy was Paul Graham. Over the next 2 decades, Graham would co-found Y Combinator, help launch Airbnb, Stripe, and Dropbox, and write a series of online essays that became the intellectual operating system of Silicon Valley. Today, we are dissecting 70 of his most iconic essays to understand how to build, think, and live in a world of conventional wisdom. Put simply. Let's start with Beating the Averages from 2001. Graham argues that if you want to win as a startup, you cannot do what everyone else is doing. If you choose the average popular tool, you will get average popular results. Lisp was VioWeb's secret weapon, allowing them to write code that wrote other code and react to customers instantly. To beat the averages, you must have the courage to stand apart. In Hackers and Painters, Graham argues that computer programming is not a branch of math or science, but a craft of making things just like painting. Both hackers and painters learn by doing. You don't design a masterpiece on paper first, you start with a sketch and iterate. Great software is built through continuous prototyping. If you want to build great software, treat it like art. If standing apart is the secret, why is it so hard? In What You Can't Say, Graham tackles conformity. Every era in human history has believed things that were later revealed to be completely wrong. To think clearly, you must be able to entertain heretical thoughts, ideas that are socially unacceptable but might actually be true. If you can't think what you can't say, your brain is owned by fashion. In How to Make Wealth, Graham dismantles the pie fallacy, the mistaken belief that there is a fixed amount of wealth in the world, meaning one person can only get rich at the expense of another. But wealth is not money. Wealth is the actual stuff people want: food, clothing, software, and wealth can be created. Startups compress a career's worth of value creation into a few intense years. In The Age of the Essay, Graham explains that schools have ruined the essay by turning it into a boring exercise in dogmatic persuasion. A true essay is not a school report where you prove a predetermined point. The word essay comes from the French essayer, meaning to try. A real essay is an active search for truth. You start with a question and you wander to find what you believe. In What You'll Wish You'd Known, Graham addresses teenagers. He argues that school is a temporary, artificial game. What matters in the real world is doing interesting things, pursuing projects of your own, and finding what you are good at, rather than optimizing for grades or popularity. Don't waste your youth trying to fit into a system designed to keep you quiet. If startups are wealth creation engines, how do you build one? In How to Start a Startup, Graham distills the entire process into just 3 simple rules. First, start with good people. Your founding team is the DNA of the company. Second, make something customers actually want. This is the #1 reason startups fail. Third, spend as little money as possible to buy your team time. Keeping wealth can be just as difficult as building it. In How to Lose Your Wealth, Graham shares a counterintuitive truth. People rarely lose wealth through active, extravagant spending. Instead, wealth is lost silently through bad investments, inaction, and neglecting to manage it. The biggest danger is not spending, but letting your money slip away through investments you don't understand. In Good Writing, Graham suggests there are 2 primary ways writing can be considered good. It sounds good prose and the ideas are right substance. These 2 aspects are deeply connected, acting like a rope with overlapping strands. Writing is not just a way to record thoughts, but a way to generate them. Clear writing is a symptom of clear thinking. In How to Do What You Love, Graham addresses the difficulty of finding fulfilling work. He warns against the prestige trap, doing things simply because they sound impressive to others. Prestige is a powerful force that leads people to work on things they don't actually like. If you want to do great work, you must ignore the opinions of others and focus on what genuinely makes you happy. To find your own original voice, you must first copy others. In Copy What You Like, Graham explains that copying the work of people you admire is a natural and necessary part of learning. Mimicking great work helps you understand the mechanics of the craft. As you copy, your own unique style will naturally start to emerge. Focus on imitating what you love. To build a better community, we must learn how to communicate. In How to Disagree, Graham outlines a disagreement hierarchy to improve online discourse. He categorizes arguments into 7 levels, from name-calling at the bottom to refuting the central point at the top. To have productive discussions, we must move to the top of the pyramid, quoting the specific passage you disagree with and explaining why. In Lies We Tell Kids, Graham examines why adults lie to children. Adults lie to maintain power, hide flaws, and protect their innocence. Protecting innocence keeps kids' minds open and focused on learning, but it leaves adults with a truth debt. The most damaging lies are those that label children, forcing arbitrary identities on them before they can think for themselves. In his essay Be Good, Graham argues that in a highly connected world, being ethical and helpful is a competitive advantage for startups. Reputation spreads instantly. Doing what is best for your customers and partners is not just moral, it is the most practical and successful approach. The best companies succeed because they are genuinely trying to make the world better. Where you choose to live actively shapes who you become. In Cities and Ambition, Graham suggests that great cities send out subtle, silent messages. New York whispers, you should make more money. Silicon Valley whispers, you should be more powerful. Boston and Cambridge whisper, you should be smarter. If you want to do great work, you need to be in a city that admires that work. Economic downturns are actually prime times to start a business. In Why to Start a Startup in a Bad Economy, Graham explains that during a recession, there is less competition for talent and resources. Furthermore, a bad economy forces a startup to be extremely disciplined and lean from day one. Many of the world's most successful companies were founded during recessions. To keep your thinking sharp, you must guard your mind against ideological capture. In Keep Your Identity Small, Graham explains that political and religious discussions are unproductive because they touch on identity. The moment an opinion becomes part of your identity, your brain treats any counterargument as a personal attack. Keep your identity small so you can evaluate every idea on its own merits. In Maker's Schedule, Manager's Schedule, Graham addresses the conflict in how we organize our time. Managers operate on the manager's schedule, where the day is divided into neat, one-hour blocks. Makers, programmers, writers, designers operate on the maker's schedule. They need large, uninterrupted blocks of time to enter a state of flow. A single meeting in the middle of the afternoon shatters their entire afternoon. Where do the best startup ideas come from? In Organic Startup Ideas, Graham argues that the best ideas are not thought up out of thin air. Instead, they are noticed as a natural byproduct of solving your own problems. When you try to invent a business for a hypothetical market, you often build solutions for problems that do not exist. When you build something you personally need, the problem is real. Venture capital is a game of extreme outliers. In Black Swan Farming, Graham explains that the most successful startup investments are black swans, ideas that seem crazy but are actually brilliant. If an idea obviously sounds good, everyone is already doing it. The best ideas look like bad ideas to most people but are actually genius. VCs must look for these non-obvious outliers. Startups do not take off automatically. In Do Things That Don't Scale, Graham argues that almost all successful startups require massive, manual, unscalable effort in the beginning. When Airbnb was failing in 2009, the founders didn't write code. They flew to New York, knocked on their users' doors, and took professional photos of their apartments. You must build the fire by hand before you can fan the flames. In the modern, highly collaborative economy, being mean is a losing strategy. In Mean People Fail, Graham observes that among the most successful people he knows, very few are mean. Being mean makes it harder to recruit top talent, retain employees, and build long-term partnerships. The most successful people are often genuinely good-natured because collaboration and trust are the ultimate leverage. As you build things, it is easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind. In the top of my to-do list, Graham reflects on the regrets of the dying. The number one regret of people nearing the end of life is that they wish they had the courage to live a life true to themselves, not the life others expected of them. Graham summarizes this in a single piece of advice: don't be a cog. To communicate effectively, you must simplify. In Write Like You Talk, Graham argues that the best writing uses the same language you would use when speaking to a friend. People often adopt a formal, complex tone when they write, which only creates distance and makes the text tiring to read. If you cannot explain an idea simply, it may be because you don't fully understand it yet. Every startup founder must ask themselves a vital question: if they don't raise more money, will the company survive on its current trajectory? This is the core of default alive or default dead. Many founders operate without calculating this metric, leading to sudden, avoidable startup deaths. Knowing your status allows you to make rational decisions about growth and spending. In Life is Short, Graham shares a realization that came after having children. Time is a finite, discrete resource. To make the most of it, we must aggressively prune bullshit, pointless disputes, bureaucracy, posturing, and addictive but unrewarding habits. Ask yourself, will I care about this in the future? If the answer is no, walk away, cultivate a habit of impatience. Societal polarization is not a new force, but the erosion of old ones. In The Refragmentation, Graham argues that the cultural and economic cohesion of the mid-20th century was an anomaly, driven by WW2 and the rise of massive corporations. Today, society is returning to its natural, fragmented, and decentralized state, driven by the rise of startups and individual leverage. In Having Kids, Graham reflects on parenthood. Before children, he feared the role as boring and restrictive. The reality was the opposite, bringing far more frequent happy moments. While attention becomes a zero-sum game, requiring disciplined work blocks, parenthood provides a profound perspective on what truly matters, anchoring your life and work. Genius is not just intelligence, it is disinterested obsession. In The Bus Ticket Theory of Genius, Graham argues that doing great work requires a deep, passionate curiosity about a topic that others find useless, like collecting bus tickets. This obsessive interest drives the years of practice necessary to make breakthroughs. Follow your obsessions, even if they seem trivial to others. The purpose of writing is utility, not prestige. In How to Write Usefully, Graham challenges the idea that the goal of writing is to show off or persuade. Instead, writing should be a tool for figuring things out and helping the reader. Good writing is clear, concise, and provides something valuable. Focus on substance and clarity rather than trying to look smart. To make original discoveries, you must protect your intellect. In How to Think for Yourself, Graham explores independent thinking. In fields where success depends on novelty like science, art, and startups, it is not enough to be correct. You must identify ideas that are both correct and novel. Independent thinking requires obsessiveness about truth, resistance to social pressure, and skepticism. In Early Work, Graham addresses the fear of creating something mediocre. This fear prevents many from ever starting. All great projects begin as crude, rough drafts. Give yourself permission to make mistakes early on, as iteration is the only way to reach excellence. In Earnestness, Graham calls this trait the highest compliment for startup founders. While it might sound old-fashioned, earnestness combined with ability creates an unstoppable force. Earnest founders focus on solving real problems rather than playing corporate games. In Billionaires Build, Graham counters the idea that extreme wealth only comes from exploitation. He argues that the most successful modern founders build massive wealth by creating genuine value and making things that millions of people love. In The Airbnbs, Graham uses the founders of Airbnb as the ultimate example of successful builders. Their defining traits were intense earnestness, a deep willingness to listen to advice, and the humility to do unscalable, manual work in the early days. In Donate Unrestricted, Graham criticizes restricted donations as a curse for nonprofits. Donors rarely have the operational context to decide how money is best spent. If you trust an organization enough to give them money, trust them to allocate it effectively. In How People Get Rich Now, Graham shows how the paths to wealth have changed. The vast majority of modern fortunes are built by starting companies, founders, 3/4, or investing in them, 1/4, proving that value creation has replaced inheritance. In The Real Reason to End the Death Penalty, Graham brings a pragmatic view to the debate. Since at least 4% of death row inmates are innocent, keeping the death penalty means accepting that the state will inevitably execute innocent citizens. In Fierce Nerds, Graham challenges the stereotype of nerds as timid. They are often highly competitive, confident, and independent thinkers who simply feel like fish out of water in ordinary social settings. Channel this intensity into ambitious projects. In An NFT That Saves Lives, Graham highlights how Nora Health used an NFT to fund training for new mothers in South Asia. By tying the digital asset's value directly to real-world medical outcomes, they prove technology can fund measurable, life-saving impact. In How to Work Hard, Graham explains that hard work means aiming toward the center of your goals, the core, most impactful tasks, rather than staying on the easy periphery. It is a learned skill, and it is far easier to work hard when you have a natural aptitude for the task. In A Project of One's Own, Graham contrasts externally imposed tasks with self-directed creative pursuits. When you work on a project driven by intrinsic motivation, you unlock a level of focus and effort that traditional jobs cannot replicate. Self-directed projects are the ultimate engines of human drive. In Write Simply, Graham argues that simple writing using ordinary words and uncomplicated sentences is the most powerful way to communicate. Complex language is a barrier and a defense mechanism. Clarity is the ultimate tool for sharing ideas. In What I Worked On, Graham shares his personal history, tracking his transitions from writing to art, hacking, and eventually investing. It shows how the seemingly unrelated threads of a lifetime naturally connect when you follow your genuine interests. In Weird Languages, Graham argues that programming languages are not equivalent. Standard languages are fine for the 99.5% of programming that is simple glue work, but weird languages like Lisp teach powerful conceptual techniques, like writing macros, that completely change how you solve complex problems. In Beyond Smart, Graham explores the gap between raw intelligence and the ability to produce important, original ideas. Society overemphasizes being smart because it is easy to measure in school, but the world ultimately cares about the value and novelty of the ideas you actually produce. In Is There Such a Thing as Good Taste?, Graham argues that objective standards of quality exist in creative fields. If good taste does not exist, then good art is a myth and no one can be skilled at creating it. Real standards exist and they are discernible. In Putting Ideas into Words, Graham argues that writing is a severe test of thinking. The act of writing reveals gaps in your understanding that you didn't know existed. You do not write to record fully formed ideas, rather, the ideas emerge and are refined during the writing process itself. In Heresy, Graham notes that the concept of heresy has returned to modern discourse. The status quo has always branded challenging ideas as heretical. To discover anything new and important, you must be willing to explore non-obvious ideas that challenge conventional assumptions and cross established boundaries. In What I've Learned from Users, Graham shares that while every startup feels unique, their fundamental challenges are repetitive and universal. The ultimate test of a founder's progress is what they have learned from their users. Fast iteration based on user feedback is the only path to success. In Alien Truth, Graham proposes that if intelligent aliens exist, they would share certain fundamental truths with humans, such as math and concepts of justice. If an idea is relevant to alien minds, it is a universal truth, implying there is much more to discover in the universe. In What You Want to Want, Graham explores the puzzle of free will. The saying "you can't want what you want" is incorrect. We can change our desires and even what we want to want. By recursively adding layers of want to, we get closer to understanding human agency. However, after 3 or 4 layers, changing your desires becomes nearly impossible. In The Need to Read, Graham explains the relationship between writing and thinking. Writing is not just a way of communicating thoughts, it is the process of thinking itself. When you write, you force yourself to organize, structure, and validate your ideas. If you do not write, you only think you are thinking, and reading is the fuel that makes this thinking possible. In How to Get New Ideas, Graham argues that ideas are not forced but noticed. The secret is to actively look for anomalies, what seems strange, missing, or broken in everyday life. By focusing on these gaps, especially problems you personally face, you uncover opportunities and unmet needs that are just becoming fixable. In his 2023 masterpiece, How to Do Great Work, Graham synthesizes everything he has learned about human achievement. To do great work, you must start by choosing what to work on, and the secret is simple: follow your curiosity. Work on things that feel like play to you but look like work to others. The recipe is iterative: choose what to work on, work hard, talk to people, and repeat. In competitive, creative fields, rewards compound exponentially. This is the core of superlinear returns. Output is not proportional to input. Driven by compounding growth, where learning and brand assets build on themselves, and thresholds, being slightly better than your competitors doesn't get you slightly better results, it often gets you everything. In The Reddits, Graham shares the story of meeting Reddit's founders. Their determination, traveling by train from Virginia to Harvard just to attend his talk, convinced him and Jessica Livingston to start Y Combinator. It proves that raw determination and the hustle to show up are the ultimate indicators of startup success. In How to Start Google, Graham explains that startups are high-growth entities designed to scale rapidly, unlike local small businesses. To build one, you must make something lots of people want and be able to reach them all. He reminds us that even Google's founders were uncertain and figuring it out as they went. In the best essay, Graham argues that the value of an essay lies in its substance, not its stylistic flair. The best essays describe a significant discovery and aim for maximum surprise, revealing insights that contradict conventional wisdom. Writing is a vehicle for discovery, and you must write to surprise yourself. Success requires the right kind of stubbornness. In The Right Kind of Stubborn, Graham distinguishes between persistence and obstinacy. Persistence is pursuing goals with energy, imagination, and constant iteration. Obstinacy is rigid, deaf to feedback, and resistant to change. Be determined, but remain open to course corrections. In When to Do What You Love, Graham argues that aligning your work with your natural curiosity is not only personally fulfilling, but also the most effective strategy for high-level professional and financial success. Genuine passion drives the deep, obsessive exploration required to build unique, valuable solutions. Curiosity is the ultimate wealth generator. In Founder Mode, Graham critiques the conventional business advice of hiring good managers and delegating everything. He argues that as companies scale, founders must stay deeply, hands-on involved in the product. Relying on professional managers often leads to a loss of vision and speed. Founder Mode means breaking the traditional hierarchy. In Writes and Write Nots, Graham warns that the rise of AI will divide society into two groups: those who still write and therefore know how to think, and those who delegate writing to AI, losing their cognitive sharpness. Just like physical fitness in the post-industrial era, writing will become a conscious choice for those who value clear thinking. In The Origins of Wokeness, Graham analyzes modern political correctness. He describes wokeness as a modern manifestation of a recurring human tendency toward moral priggishness, a desire for moral purity that expresses itself by attacking social rule breakers. He traces its origins to 1980s university humanities departments, later amplified by social media. In What to Do, Graham addresses the ultimate question of life: what should one do? His answer is simple yet profound: help people and take care of the world. While it sounds like a childhood lesson, it provides a solid, meaningful foundation for guiding all human activity. It is the ultimate North Star for a meaningful life. In How to Lose Time and Money, Graham reflects on life after selling Viaweb. The greatest threat to a fortune is not active overspending or extravagance, but rather self-indulgence and the silent loss of time and money through bad investments. Protecting wealth requires a completely different skill set than acquiring it. In The Shape of the Essay Field, Graham describes the trade-offs of writing. You can either change readers thinking a lot about moderately important topics or change it a little about very important ones. Writing about important topics naturally attracts younger readers whose minds have the most room to be shaped. The goal is simply to surprise yourself. In How to Convert Between Wealth and Income Tax, Graham explains the mathematical conversion between the two. He shows that assuming a 5% rate of return, a 1% wealth tax is equivalent to a 20% income tax. This math reveals that even small wealth taxes have a massive, compounding effect on capital, which is often misunderstood by policymakers. In The Brand Age, Graham explains that when technological innovation plateaus and performance becomes commoditized, industries shift from product-centric to brand-centric competition. Using the Swiss watch industry as a case study, he shows how design shifts from functional elegance to loud status signaling. When performance is solved, branding becomes the battlefield. In How to Earn $1 Billion, Graham explains that becoming a billionaire without cheating is a matter of mathematics. It is driven by two key factors: the growth rate of a startup and how long that growth continues. Founders achieve this by solving real problems and making things users love, which naturally drives the exponential compounding required. 70 essays spanning over 25 years revealing a singular philosophy. To build something meaningful, you must think for yourself, protect your focus, do the unscalable work, prune the noise, and follow your curiosity wherever it leads. Put simply, the operating system for a great life is to keep your identity small and your ambitions large. Which of these essays resonated most with you? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video valuable, hit the like button and subscribe for more ideas. Put simply, until next time, keep building.